She paid $860 for a dinner she never agreed to attend, at a restaurant she never chose, for a woman who gave her a side hug at the door and spent the entire meal looking right through her. And the most remarkable part, the part that made me need to tell you this story, is that she knew it was coming. She had known for months, and she had been ready for longer than anyone at that table could have imagined. I want you to sit with that for a second, because this is not a story about a woman who snapped. It is not a story about a bad night that spun out of control. This is a story about a woman who did the quiet, unglamorous, deeply disciplined work of understanding her own situation with complete clarity, and then waited, calmly, for the moment to arrive. When it did, she did not flinch. Not once. Her name, for the purposes of this story, is Serene. She is 32 years old. She lives in Atlanta, Georgia. The kind of Atlanta that is not in the glossy magazine version, but in the real one, the one with beautiful neighborhoods that have exactly one restaurant on the corner where everyone knows your business by the second visit. She has a master's degree in accounting and a client list that includes 14 small businesses she manages the books for. She has been doing this since she was 25. She knows what money looks like when it moves. She knows what it looks like when it disappears. She knows the difference between a miscategorized expense and a deliberate pattern. And for 3 years of marriage to a man named Marcus, she had been watching a very specific pattern unfold with the kind of clarity that only someone who reads bank statements for a living can sustain. Marcus is a good man in many ways. I want to be careful here, because this story is easier to reduce than it deserves to be. He is warm. He is generous. He laughs easily and means it. He loved Serene in ways that were real and visible and not performative. But Marcus had a mother, and Marcus had spent 40 years learning that his mother's comfort was his responsibility. Her name is Darlene. She is 64. She retired from a mid-level administrative position 8 years ago, and has since organized her life around 2 things: her social calendar and her son's checking account. Not because she is a monster, because she is a woman who learned, over decades, that a particular combination of warmth and expectation produces results. She would hug you at the door and compliment your earrings, and then, before the soup arrived, find a gentle way to mention that the roof was giving her trouble again. Serene saw it from the beginning. That is the thing that haunted her later, sitting at her kitchen table at 11:30 at night, with a spreadsheet open, and a cup of tea gone cold beside her laptop. She had seen it from the very first dinner. She had noticed the way Darlene's eyes moved to Marcus whenever a check arrived, the way the conversation somehow always found its way, by the 3rd glass of wine, to some expense that was just slightly beyond what Darlene could manage right now. Serene had noticed, and she had said nothing, because she was new to the family, and she did not want to be the woman who came in with a clipboard. That silence was a choice. She has never stopped being honest with herself about that. The first transfer was $430 for a plumbing repair at Darlene's house. Serene found it on the joint statement and asked Marcus about it. He said his mom had a leak. It was an emergency. It was not a big deal. Serene let it go. The second was a car insurance payment for Marcus's younger brother, Devin. Then a deposit on a family vacation Darlene had organized for a trip that Serene and Marcus were not invited on but were apparently helping to fund. Then Devin's girlfriend needed help with a security deposit. Then Darlene's HOA dues were past due, and her Social Security check had not cleared yet, which, as Serene well knew from the pattern of those transactions, meant it had cleared and been spent on other things. She let it go. She let it go. She let it go. And every time she let it go, the number got larger and the silence got heavier, and Marcus got slightly better at reading her expression, and slightly worse at addressing what it meant. I need to pause here and be honest with you, because I think this is where a lot of people in similar situations lose themselves. Serene was not weak. She was not passive by nature. She was, in her professional life, precisely the opposite, a woman who caught errors other people missed, who asked the uncomfortable questions, who delivered hard news to clients without softening it into uselessness. But inside her marriage, she had developed a second self, a quieter one. One that told her that financial conflict was not worth the cost of the argument, that Marcus would come around eventually, that she was maybe being too rigid about money. She had convinced herself, in the way smart people sometimes convince themselves of things they know are not true, that if she was patient enough, the pattern would correct itself. It did not correct itself. Patterns never do. By the time she finally opened her own spreadsheet, not for a client, for herself, she had been married to Marcus for 2 years and 4 months. The total at the bottom of that spreadsheet was $22,640. She stared at that number for a long time. She made herself a new cup of tea. She stared at it again. Then she saved the file in 3 places, because she is an accountant, and she understands backup systems, and she sat back in her chair and thought, with a stillness she had not felt in years, about what she was going to do. She did not make a scene. She did not confront Marcus that night. She did not call Darlene. What she did, over the following 6 weeks, was methodical and quiet and completely invisible. She consulted a family law attorney not because she had decided to leave, but because she believed, with her whole professional self, that a person should understand their options before they need them. She opened a new checking account at a bank that was not their credit union, at a branch on the other side of the city. She changed her direct deposit. She paid down and closed her portion of the joint credit card. She kept her own card in her wallet, new, activated, connected only to her new account, and she said nothing. She waited. Darlene turned 64 in late October. She decided she wanted a birthday dinner, a proper one, at Aurelius, which is a steakhouse in Buckhead where the bread basket alone costs more than some people's lunches. She invited 20 people. She narrowed it to 16. She settled on 14, which included Devin and his girlfriend, 3 women from her church small group, 2 neighbors, a cousin named Bertrand who drove in from Macon, and a man named Theodore who apparently played golf with Marcus's late father and had maintained a standing invitation to family events for the better part of a decade. Serene had met Theodore exactly once. He had a firm handshake and expressed strong opinions about airport parking. Marcus told Serene about the dinner the way he told her about things he had already decided. He mentioned it on a Tuesday evening while he was looking at his phone and she was reading on the couch. He said his mom wanted to do something special this year. He said it would be a nice night out. He did not say he intended to pay for 14 people's dinner at a $60 per entree steakhouse. He did not say it because he did not need to. In 5 years together, they had developed a habit that had calcified into an assumption. When a bill arrived in a social setting involving his family, Marcus reached for Serene's bag, and Serene let him, and no one ever said anything. It had started as practicality. She was the one who managed their finances. She tracked the accounts. It made sense for her to have the card ready. It had become something else entirely. Something she had a word for now, sitting across from that attorney in a quiet office on Peachtree Road. The night of the dinner, she wore a black dress and small gold earrings, and she felt, getting dressed in front of the bathroom mirror, like someone standing at the edge of something. Not afraid. Clear. She put her new card in her clutch. She left the joint card on the nightstand. Marcus was downstairs ironing his shirt and talking to Devin on the phone about parking, and he did not notice. She looked at herself in the mirror one more time. She was ready. Aurelius on a Saturday night is the kind of warm and loud that costs money to achieve. The lighting is amber. The tables are spaced far enough apart to create the illusion of privacy and close enough together to ensure none of it is real. Darlene was already there when they arrived, seated at the head of a long table in a plum-colored wrap dress, champagne in hand, holding court with the ease of a woman who has been performing a certain version of herself for so long, the performance has become the person. She lit up when she saw Marcus. She turned to Serene and offered the hug that only used one shoulder. Serene sat down. She ordered the halibut. She smiled when she was supposed to smile. For 2 hours she watched. She watched Darlene order dishes for the table without consulting anyone. She watched her refill her own wineglass before the first course arrived. She watched her tell a story about a trip she took to Savannah 4 years ago, and then tell it again, slightly differently. and then tell it a third time in a version where she had apparently stayed in a suite and been upgraded for free. Each time, Marcus laughed like he was hearing it fresh. He loved his mother. Serene knew that. She had never once doubted it. That was, in a way, the whole problem. The dessert menus came and went. The server began gathering the plates. And then Darlene clinked her glass with a small silver spoon, and the table went quiet, and she stood up, or nearly stood up. She put one hand on the table and rose to a kind of ceremonial half-height, and she smiled with the full wattage of a woman who has spent 6 decades perfecting it. She thanked everyone for coming. She said that birthdays, at her age, were not about the number but about the people. She said that God had blessed her with a son who showed up for his family without being asked, every single time. She looked at Marcus. That particular look. Not quite love, not quite need. Something that lived in the space between them. The specific expression of a woman who has confused devotion with ownership for so long she cannot see the seam. And she said, "I know my baby has already taken care of everything tonight. That's just how he was raised." She sat back down. The table applauded lightly. Bertrand from Macon raised his glass. Theodore nodded with an expression suggesting he approved. Marcus reached across towards Serene's clutch. The familiar gesture. The hand she had opened that bag for 100 times. She let him take it. She let him unzip it. She let him reach inside. He found the card. He walked to the card reader the server was holding with the practiced calm of a man who does this without thinking. Serene watched him insert it. She watched him type in the amount. The screen was angled away from her. But she had done the math before they even sat down, and she knew it was somewhere north of $900. She had been sitting with that number, quietly, all evening. The machine beeped. Not the soft, settled sound of approval. The other sound. Flat. Brief. Final. No one at the table reacted immediately. Marcus tried again. He inserted the card slowly, the way people do when they need the machine to have made an error. He typed in the amount again. The machine beeped again. He came back to the table. He leaned down towards Serene, voice low, jaw tight. "It's not going through. Do you have another card?" She looked at the card in his hand. "Which one is that?" she asked. "The joint card." She looked up at him. The entire table had gone just slightly, imperceptibly quieter. The way rooms do when something is happening that has not been acknowledged yet. "That account is closed," she said. Marcus went very still. "What did you say?" "I closed it. A few weeks ago." He stared at her. She watched him process it. She watched the moment land in stages. Confusion first, then something sharper. Darlene had gone rigid at the head of the table. She had the finely tuned alertness of a woman who has spent years listening for financial information beneath social conversation. "Do you have another card?" Marcus asked. His voice was controlled. Barely. "Yes," Serene said. He held out his hand. She looked at his hand. She looked at it for a long moment. "And I want you to understand what that moment contained, because it was not a moment of anger. Anger would have required her to still be surprised. She was not surprised. She had been preparing for this specific geometry, his hand out, her card in her clutch, the expectation hanging in the air like it was gravity for months. She had imagined it. She had practiced her own stillness in the mirror of that bathroom where she got dressed 3 hours ago. She had asked herself, in the middle of 100 quiet nights, whether she would be able to hold herself when the moment finally arrived. She was. She was absolutely able. "I have another card," she said, clearly, pleasantly, in the voice she uses with clients when she is delivering information they are not going to like. "But I'm not going to hand it to you to pay for this dinner." Someone at the far end of the table drew in a breath. "Darlene set down her champagne flute." "Excuse me?" she said. Serene stood up. She smoothed her dress. She picked up her clutch. She walked to where the server was standing with the card reader, and she said, quietly, that she would like to pay the bill. Her card, her name, the full amount. She handed it over herself. She came back to the table and sat down. The silence was the kind that a room of 14 people produces only when something real has just happened. Marcus was looking at her with an expression she had not seen on his face before. It was not anger exactly. It was something closer to the specific fear of a person who has just realized how much has been happening without them. Darlene was the first to speak, because Darlene was always the first to speak. "I don't know what that was supposed to prove," she said, and her voice had dropped into a register that was no longer social, "but you have embarrassed my son in front of his family." Serene looked at her. Directly. Steadily. "I haven't embarrassed anyone," she said. "I paid the bill. That's what I did. I paid $860 for your birthday dinner, Darlene. Your son came out just fine." Darlene's chin lifted. "After everything this family has, I have a spreadsheet." The sentence landed like a door closing. "I beg your pardon?" "I keep records," Serene said. "It's what I do for a living." She reached into the clutch, the same clutch Marcus had just rummaged through looking for a card that no longer worked, and she set her phone on the table, screen facing up. The document was already open. She had saved it as a PDF months ago, and she had carried it with her the way a surgeon carries a second pair of gloves. Not because she planned to use it, because she had learned that when you have documentation, you do not leave it at home. $22,640, she said, over 2 years and 7 months. Every transaction, every date, every account it left from, repairs to your house, Devon's insurance, the Hilton Head deposit, the HOA dues, the transfer you requested directly from me in March that you have not mentioned since. She looked up from the phone. "So when you say, after everything this family has done, I am sincerely interested in what you mean. Because I have been keeping the other side of that ledger, and I can tell you with complete professional certainty that it does not balance." The table was entirely silent. Theodore was looking at a point somewhere above Serene's head. Bertrand, from Macon, had put down his fork. Devon's girlfriend was studying her water glass with tremendous focus. Marcus sat down. He sat down slowly, the way people do when their legs have quietly decided not to work anymore. "Cora," he started. "Serene," she said, not correcting him, just present. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," she said, and she meant it fully, completely, in a way she needed him to understand. "I am doing this because I have been quiet for 3 years. I have tried every quiet version of this conversation. I tried mentioning it in year 1 and you told me it was temporary. I tried again in year 2 and you said I didn't understand how close your family was. I kept the spreadsheet because I needed to know what was real, and this," she touched the edge of the phone, "gently is what is real. I am not asking you to choose between me and your mother. I am asking you to see what has been happening. That is all I am asking." Darlene looked at her son. "Are you going to allow this?" Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He was quiet. "I cannot tell you how much I needed to pause when I first heard this part of the story. Because I have seen, in the way that we all have, what usually happens in that moment. The husband smooths it over. The husband says something about emotions and how maybe this isn't the time. The husband chooses the path that costs him nothing in the next 10 minutes. Marcus did not do that. I do not know what moved in him in that stretch of silence. I only know that he did not come to his mother's defense. And for a woman who had been watching him choose comfort over honesty for 5 years, his silence was the loudest thing that happened all night. Serene picked up her phone. She finished her water. She set the glass down carefully. Darlene gathered herself, offered her book club friends, a smile that carried the weight of a woman performing composure at great cost, kissed them each on the cheek, and walked out of the restaurant without looking at Serene. Devon followed a minute later, one hand on his girlfriend's back, offering Marcus a long, weighted look that meant "we will discuss this." Theodore stayed for the complimentary birthday sorbet and seemed to have a genuinely pleasant time. If you have ever sat in a room where something that was true for years finally got said out loud, you know the particular quality of the quiet afterward. It is not comfortable. It is not triumphant. It is something more like the feeling of a window being opened in a house that has been shut up for too long. The air is strange. It is cold, but it is air. On the drive home, Marcus did not speak for 40 minutes. The city slid past outside the window, the long stretch of I-85, the amber of the streetlights, the skyline retreating in the side mirror. When he finally spoke, what he said was not an apology, or an accusation, or a defense. What he said was, "The 22,000. I didn't know it was that much." "I know," Serene said. "I didn't know." "I know you didn't. That's part of the problem." He was quiet again. Then, "When you moved the account, were you leaving?" She thought about how to answer that honestly, because he deserved an honest answer, and she had decided, somewhere in the last 6 months of her preparation, that honesty was the only currency she had left that still felt like her own. "I don't know yet," she said, "but something has to change. Not eventually. Now. And I need to know that you understand that in a way you have never understood it before." He nodded. He kept his eyes on the road. He nodded again. And this time it was different. Not the nod of a man agreeing to stop a conversation, but the nod of a man beginning to understand the shape of what he had missed. "I want to talk to you about what Serene did the next morning, because it matters and I do not want to skip it." She emailed Darlene a copy of the spreadsheet, not to punish her. She included a note, 3 sentences. She wrote that she had no interest in being Darlene's enemy. She wrote that she was open to a relationship built on something other than financial access to Marcus. She wrote that if Darlene wanted to talk, genuinely talk, she was available. Then she put her phone down and went to see her first client of the morning. Darlene read the email. The receipt came back within the hour. She did not respond for 9 days. When she finally did, it was a text, and it was 5 words. "I think we should talk." Serene made her wait 2 days before responding. Not out of cruelty. She had 3 quarterly reports due and a new client onboarding, and she had spent 3 years allowing other people's urgency to override her own schedule. She was done with that. Marcus and Serene are in couples therapy now. Their therapist is a precise, clear-eyed woman who has a gift for asking the questions that cannot be answered with anything other than the truth. Marcus has said things in that office that surprised Serene. She has said things that surprised herself. She does not know if the marriage survives. She is sitting with that uncertainty in a way she could not have managed a year ago, because a year ago she would have been too afraid of the answer to ask the question honestly. What I want to say to you, and I mean this in the way that you say something to a person, not an audience, is that this story is not really about a dinner. It is not really about a declined card or a spreadsheet or a woman who outmaneuvered her mother-in-law in a Buckhead steakhouse. Though all of that is true and all of it matters. This story is about the decision that happened quietly, in a kitchen, at 11:30 at night, when Serene opened a document that was only for herself, and finally let herself see clearly what she had been refusing to see. That was the moment. Everything else, the new account, the attorney's office, the card in the clutch, the walk across the restaurant floor was just the shape that decision took in the real world. The mistake most people make in a situation like hers is waiting for permission to protect themselves. They wait for the pattern to become undeniable. They wait for someone else to name it. They wait until the anger is so large it cannot be managed. Serene did not wait for anger. She waited for clarity, which is a completely different thing. Anger is reactive. Clarity is constructed. It takes time and documentation and at least one very long night sitting alone with the truth. What this story taught me is that there is a specific kind of courage that does not look like courage from the outside. It looks like a woman opening a new checking account on her lunch break. It looks like printing a PDF and saving it in 3 places. It looks like putting a card in a clutch and leaving a different one on a nightstand, and saying nothing, and waiting. That is the hardest courage. Not the speech at the table, the months of quiet work that made the speech possible. Here's the question I want to leave you with today, and I want you to actually sit with it rather than just reading past it. Is there a pattern in your life that you have named privately, but not yet addressed publicly? Even if publicly just means saying it out loud to the one person who needs to hear it. What would it look like to prepare for that conversation the way Serene prepared? not impulsively, methodically, with receipts. If you are watching this and you have been in a version of this room, not necessarily a restaurant, maybe a living room, maybe a conversation that happened over text, maybe a pattern that everyone around you has normalized, but that you have never been able to stop seeing clearly, I want you to know that clarity is not the same as readiness. You are allowed to know something is true before you know what to do about it. You are allowed to make the spreadsheet before you decide what it means. Before I let you go, I need to know something from you. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think Serene handled this the right way? Type 1 for yes, she did exactly what needed to be done. Type 2 if you think she should have confronted Marcus privately first before that dinner. Or type 3 if you think she went too far and the public setting made it worse. I genuinely want to know where you land on this, because I do not think there is one clean answer, and I think the conversation in the comments is going to be better than anything I could say. Also, tell me where you are watching from, and what time it is there. It means a lot to know who is on the other side of this. And if you have ever been in a situation where you had to make a quiet, private decision before you could make a public one, I want to hear about it. You do not have to share details. Even just knowing you have been in that room is something. If this story stayed with you, please consider subscribing. I tell stories like this one because I believe the most important conversations we have are the ones where nobody is performing, where we are just trying to understand what people actually do, and why, and what it costs them, and what it gives back. That is what this channel is for. I will see you in the next one. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Atlanta, Georgia, to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental.